In terms of those live dates, what have we got? You've got a hell of a lot up until August, I believe.
Yeah, well, we got some for the rest of the year. There's some in October and November too that maybe haven't been announced yet. But it's unfortunately none of it's in the UK. We'd love to get there, I know.
We'd love you to be here. Hopefully we can make it happen because I've seen some of the set lists that you do, and you cover a wide range of material from the Jefferson Starship family, including material from the 60s up until Starship, as well as all the key tracks that you were directly involved with.
Yep. Jefferson Airplane too.
Yeah.
Because Jefferson Starship always did a few of those anyway.
Tell me about the current live group that you've got, because I think you've been fairly stable since certainly since before the pandemic.
Well, we've been stable since Paul passed away, actually. Since it's been stable since 2012 when Jude joined. It's 13 years, isn't it? Yeah. And when Jude joined, I don't know, Paul was having some health problems, and every now and then there'd be emergencies, and we'd have to do the gig without him, you know, which was always a problem. But we suddenly noticed that this band, but among all five of us, that this band was really together like nothing any of us had ever really expected. We knew what the next person was going to do. It was kind of like the dream that I had the minute I saw A Hard Day's Night, you know, about how the Beatles pretended to be the movie. And it was all, I mean, it was beyond, nobody's ever, hardly ever anybody and mad at each other. And if there's a disagreement of it within a few hours, everybody will be, you know, it seems very family like. And and it's been that way ever since 2012. And when Paul passed away, and Grace and Paul's family asked us, would you like to continue? I said, that's the thing we'd really like to do most of all, because we were having such a good time playing with each other. It seemed a shame to stop. And so we got the license from Grace, and it's been fine ever since. And I mean, she even wrote a few songs with us. Or one, I think she's writing another with Kathy right now, perhaps.
Yeah, that was on your most recent album,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
yeah. It's about time.
Given Jefferson Airplane, Jefferson Starship are one of the greatest bands ever, you're carrying the baton of keeping that incredible music alive.
Well, that's the idea, because it needs to be played live today. You know, we do our best to put on a good show. What really is involved is everybody's having a good time and relating to each other, you know. And if you do that, and the audience, you can't go wrong. You're having fun, and the audience is having fun, then it's great.
How does the live show differ now to 50 years ago? Is it quite different?
Well, other than 50 years ago, some of the songs wouldn't have been written yet, but but no, yeah, I don't know. It's Of course it's different. There are different people involved. I mean, there's me. I'm the one that's been there. I mean, I was in the last Jefferson Airplane tour, and on the last album, the live album, 30 Seconds Over Winterland. Then when Paul and Grace and I realized that Jefferson Airplane wasn't happening anymore, and we had these two albums that we made, Baron von Tolbooth and the Chrome Nun and Manhole, uh, we had to go out and play to support these, and what were we going to call it? So it was obvious to anybody that knows Paul, it would be Jefferson Starship, and there you were.
And you've mentioned the Beatles and A Hard Day's Night, but around that period, in fact, predating the Beatles, you were around the folk scene, weren't you?
Oh yeah, let's see. this is kind of an oxymoron, a professional folk singer. But a folk singer really shouldn't be professional, should they? It's supposed to be a folk. But anyway, but I was with a girl named Michaela. Had a little group, David and Michaela, with Bob Conger on bass and wit, I believe is how it was packaged. And we were playing and until actually, to tell you the truth, when Michaela married Bob, who was the bass player, Bob Conger, they both stopped smoking pot because
Right.
it was illegal. And they were pressuring me to stop too. And it wasn't going to happen. And
No.
it's kind of like our senses of humor verged away from one another. And so I had to leave and I ended up in Paul Kantner in San Jose because he'd been a friend of, I mean, we picked a lot of banjos and guitars, and we decided, well, maybe we could form a duo and and we got together and for like about 63 to 65, like a couple of years, you know, hanging out together. And like now, Paul was my oldest friend that I had in the world, just about. And it's funny how it all involved. Marijuana comes into it again. I got arrested for possessing like less than an ounce of marijuana and was actually put in jail for that. And and Paul came and visited me in jail and said that I'm forming a band with Marty Bell and I think we're going to call it Jefferson Airplane. And that seemed like a wonderful idea to me because that was the idea of everybody in San Francisco at that point. And when I got out, a couple of weeks later, actually, we began forming Quicksilver Messenger Service, although we didn't know that was the name yet. But I got together with John Chippoline and Jimmy Murray, and we were looking for a drummer. And actually, we ran into a guitar player named Skip Spence, who
Wow.
who, uh, who in the park in Sausalito when we were playing guitars, and and Marty Ballin and his dad had opened up the Matrix, which was a club in San Francisco. And Paul and Marty always said, well, you guys can come over and practice in the daytime if you need someplace to play. So we came over and we're playing with Skip, and Marty walked in and saw Skip and said, do you play drums? And he said, I played in the band in high school. And he said, you're our drummer. And
Wow.
so he took him away from us.
David Crosby was around the scene as well. You
Oh,
knew David well.
yeah, I knew David since he was in Les Baxter's Balladeers. It was the folk group. He and his brother were actually in that band. At one point, Paul and I had a house in Venice, California, just out, it's in LA, really. And because we thought we'd go down there and try to become, see what if we could get gigs singing folk songs. And we ended up, I think, spending more time on because that was right by the beach, and we spent a lot of time there. And David Crosby showed up there a lot too, because I'd met him, about a year before that, and we didn't know what he was doing. And Jim McGuinn, who had become Roger McGuinn, was playing Beatles songs on his 12 string at the Troubadour, and so eventually David and Roger became the Byrds, obviously, that we know.
You were bringing some of that folk material into Quicksilver, like Codeine, weren't you?
Yeah, Codine, yeah, yeah, the Buffy St. Marie song, and also Pride of Man. Actually, I think I got a lead sheet for that from Dino Valenti, who passed through actually, and learned it. And I brought that up to Quicksilver because it seemed like we could rock it up a little bit. I think it was our first single or something.
Was it you and Gary Duncan on lead vocals with Quicksilver.
Yeah, until Dino Valenti finally got himself released from jail for possession of marijuana and joined the band.
Live dates, you were jamming a lot?
Well, that's kind of what Quicksilver did. We jam on like Bo Diddley's "Who Do You Love," and that ended up being the whole side, a 25-minute version of "Who Do You Love," which we divided up into "When Do You Love," "Which You Love," "How You Love." But we gave Bo Diddley called it "Who Do You Love" for two times, so he got credit for having it on our album twice. So we figured the solos had not much to do with the song though, and more to do with LSD, I think. The live sessions was recorded live in the Fillmore East and Fillmore West. So the Fillmore West one was the one where everybody in the building was dosed on acid. And so there was a portion of that gets pretty far out.
And did signing to a record company and having quite a bit of success with Quicksilver kind of change things?
Yeah. Well, everything changed. I mean, just being in San Francisco at that point, even before we had a record contract at all. I mean, we were playing the Fillmore and the Winterland and the Avalon and making a pretty good living just being there and didn't have a record. But being in San Francisco, we kind of would sell the place out just like any of the ones that had records. And so our manager took his time and eventually signed with Capitol. And so I don't think ours came out until 68, which was pretty late in the game. Everybody else had a head start on us. And Gary Duncan quit right when Happy Trails, which was our biggest selling album, came out. So we had to finish it without him, and get it mixed and everything. And so it was mostly lives. And so he went off with Dino to form another band. I don't know what, I think they were going to call it Outlaws or something, but didn't have much success with it. And after almost exactly a year, they came back and Gary said, well, I'll get back in the band, but Dino's got to come with me. And so, okay. Because I missed Gary. Gary was very important. And we had Nicky Hopkins playing with us at that point.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
But made an album without Gary called Shady Grove.
Right.
Yeah. Nicky had a song else, Edward the Mad Shirt Grinder, which was on that album. And so for about, I don't know, 6 months or so, we actually had Dino and Gary and John Cipollina, me and Greg Elmore and Nicky Hopkins. And for a while we were getting along and it was really good. But eventually Dino had to be the center of attention. And and I found myself not doing anything in the band except playing B3 organ mostly. And and not that I didn't enjoy that, but that was all I was doing. And I said, look, I'm not really a great B3 player, why don't you guys, I got arrested again for less than an ounce of pot. And I had to go, they wanted to put me in jail for a 60-day sentence. And I said, look, I got to go away and you're going to have to play. Why don't you get yourself somebody that really knows how to play the organ really well, and I'll just go my way and you go yours. And they didn't like that, but my mind was made up. And eventually I got out of course in 45 days because I behaved very well, good behavior. And, and I worked with Mickey Hart from the Grateful Dead because he had a studio in the same town that I live in, and helped him with his first solo album and worked on that for a while. And I brought in And there was other things going on in San Francisco. There was David Crosby was making his solo album, If I Could Only Remember My Name, at Wally Heider's in San Francisco, and pretty much everybody, the Grateful Dead, Jefferson Airplane, and me from Quicksilver was always over there and hanging out and playing. And there's a bunch of tapes called the Planet Earth Rock and Roll Orchestra that are out digitally or out there floating around that of this group of people, which is mostly almost everybody in the Grateful Dead, David Crosby, Graham Nash, me, and just sitting around playing with the tape going, learning songs basically. And so um, I brought Paul and Grace in to sing harmony on a song on Mickey Hart's album, Blind John, the Guitar Player, it's called. And they seemed to have a good time playing it. And Grace actually played piano on it also. And
Oh,
yeah, Marty Ballin left the airplane. And they needed that third voice for the three-part harmony. And so they asked me would I like to join? And I said, of course, I'd be happy to. And so then we did the first tour, which apparently was the last tour. And and then Paul and Grace each had an album they owed RCA. So I went in and we produced those two albums, Baron von Tolbooth and the Chrome Nut and Manhole, and then named it Jefferson Starship, and the rest is history, I guess.
with the first Jefferson Starship album, Dragonfly, you had some great tracks on there like Ride the Tiger.
Ride the Tiger, yeah, and Caroline, and yeah, there was some good stuff on there. But before we went out, we got Pete Sears to play from. I had run into him. He was playing with John Cipollina's band Copperhead, and I noticed that he and Jim McPherson, a friend of mine who also was my main co-writer for Jane. I noticed they both played keyboards and bass, and they traded places, all the way through the set. And I said, wow, that's pretty good. And I thought, and Pete was a great bass player, and God, I mean, he's a great piano player too. And while we were making Manhole, Pete was I think producing a Kathy McDonald album in one of the other studios. And so I thought took me maybe I ought to introduce him to Paul and Grace. So I brought him in, and he played a song on Manhole. Anyway, a blues song.
Yeah.
And when it came time to go out and play, we thought, why don't we get Pete to play bass? But he was busy with Rod Stewart, I think, over in making an album. And so he couldn't make it in time to do the first tour, but he did make it back and became the playing bass and keyboards, swapping with me in Jefferson Starship by the time we made the first album. And love that. That was fun.
And on the album Red Octopus, there's Miracles, one of Marty's songs, but you had a key role in that fantastic organ sound, didn't you?
Well, I played the organ on it, and when we did the basic track in the studio, it was one of those times when everybody was really on it. And I don't know, the beginning lick, I don't know. I played it just while we were warming up, and somebody said, "Can you do that again?" I said, "Well, yeah, I can do it as many times as you want." And so I don't know, it just showed up there. It was one of those magic times. It was a beautiful track.
And the current live shows with Jefferson Starship, you sing that, don't you?
I sing, actually, Kathy sings the lead on that.
Oh, okay.
I do all the background parts.
Right.
And I'm playing guitar most. If I play something, I play guitar in this band. singing is the most important thing to me anyways. And singing harmony was always one of the joys of my life. I love singing harmony. And I don't mind singing lead too, but you know,
And you mentioned Jane as well, one of the great Jefferson Starship tracks. Um,
yeah.
what inspired you to write that song?
Oh, it was based on some problem I was having with my wife, actually. But I would say that the song became something else. And we called it Jane, like for Marty suggested that actually. You call it, well, yeah, he said I got to change the name. And he says, well, Jane Doe. And it was Dad. So we called her Jane. I was writing it for Marty, but he quit the band after we had that the debacle at Lorelei in Germany, where Grace didn't play and the audience objected because Paul wouldn't play without Grace and yada, yada, yada. And they burned the place down. It was one of the, never saw anything like that. It was really stupid, but okay. It happened.
Mickey Thomas joined the group, and
When Marty and Grace were both out of the band, and we had a bunch of songs to do, including Jane. And Craig Chiquiso came up with the real rock and roll part of it. And so he did the arrangement. And so we were trying out lead singers. And whoever sang Jane the best apparently would probably get the gig. And when Mickey Thomas came in, there was, I don't it was amazing. He had he has one of the best voices ever. And he sings all this stuff effortlessly. And, and so he obviously was going to get the job.
you mentioned earlier about there was a point in Quicksilver where you felt you didn't have enough to do in the group and didn't have a key role. And was that the feeling that you had as Jefferson Starship morphed into Starship? You weren't as involved as much as you should have been.
Well, what they needed was somebody that could play insanely wonderful keyboards because the producer was Peter Wolf, and he was like the Vienna Academy of Music, you know. I mean, he was a keyboard genius. I play licks that I hear, you know, and stuff, but I mean, that wasn't what I did, you know. So yeah, I was thinking that how am I going to get out of here? And everybody else was thinking, how are we going to get him out of here? So so we left, I left, and of course that was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me because I met my wife because Gary Duncan calls me up just after I left and he says, I've got this chick singer coming over to my studio and I've got 4 songs I got to do backgrounds on because the 2 girls I had in here who did them were too stoned and I can't use any of it. Do you think you could come over? And I said, sure. Then I got there and he said, you want to go pick her up at this bus stop? She's taking a bus over from San Francisco. And there she was, a girl named Linda Imperial. And she ended up joining Quicksilver and ended up marrying me. So,
So it all
and
worked out.
we are still married today.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And is Donnie Baldwin still playing with you in
Yes, Donnie Baldwin came back about the same time I did when after Starship expired, kind of. I think I'd have to say it was a bunch. Number one, Grace was tired of it, and number two, we had ego problems. Everybody was responsible for the success, right? Without me, this wouldn't happen, right? And eventually, it stopped happening altogether, and they dissolved. So, I mean, that's my outsider's look at it. But so when that ended, Paul said, "Well, there's no reason I can't. beat Jefferson Starship again, so he got his band together and he had Marty would play with him quite often. And he had, for a while, he had Jack Cassidy playing bass and, and various people would play keyboards. And around 1998, he picked up Chris Smith, who's playing with us now. And so since 1990, Chris Smith has been playing in Jefferson Starship, 1998 to present day, which is like 27 years, which is
Amazing.
probably longer than anybody has played in Jefferson Starship at one straight. Anyway, Donnie and I came back, I guess, in 2005.
Donnie was in Starship.
And Jefferson Starship by 1982, and he stayed there during Starship.
Right. And so you do a few Starship tracks live now, don't you?
Yeah, people get confused. And I know there's about half the people in the United States seem to have Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now as their wedding song. And they'd be completely disappointed if they didn't hear it. So yeah, we do three of them, I think, the ones that people really need to hear. And they're quite fun to sing, actually. And since I've been in this band, I realized, oh, I can sing lead. Having a great time singing with Kathy. Kathy Richardson is a force unto the universe. She's a wonderful singer and a genius in many ways. Jude Gold is a great guitar player. I can't think of anybody better, actually. He's as good as anybody. But, it all depends on what you like. But he can play anything. Yeah.
And your last album was Mother of the Sun.
I sing a song called Setting Sun on that one that Kathy and I wrote. Actually, Marty and Chris wrote a song called Don't Be Sad Anymore. And so we put a version of that on the album also with just nothing but piano and vocal. So me and Chris Smith, yes.
Do you see yourself releasing new material with Jefferson Starship?
Yes, we just have to find time to be in the same city or figure out a way to do it. But there's a bunch of songs we've been working on for a couple of years now and haven't managed to get them done, but we will.
Well, it's
We'll
amazing you're keeping the Jefferson Airplane, Jefferson Starship lineage continuing after 60 years now, I think. So
51 years is really, we're still celebrating the 50th anniversary this year. We decided it's 50 years. We can spend a year and a half celebrating it.
that's
And
brilliant, David.
I'm having too much fun to quit. And anyway, I'm 86 years old. Come on. And so I figure keeping this going is what's keeping me alive. So, and I'm having too much fun. So as long as I can do it, I'm going to do it.
And the people want it.
That seems to be true. I love that part.
Well, hopefully we can persuade you to come over to the UK at some point and we can see you here. But it's fantastic that you're going across the United States for much of the rest of the year. So
Yeah, well, maybe we'll figure out a way to do it. I don't know. Last time we were over in Europe a couple of times with Deep Purple, and when it came time for their UK part, there was some kind of thing where their booker had already booked somebody else and wouldn't change his mind. But if I think the band had anything completely to say about it, they would have chose us because we became great buddies with them while we were playing. We had a good time. But
uh,
you had to be in Germany or Poland to hear us. So,
thank you so much, David. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you, and I wish you all the best with those dates and look forward to new material as well.
oh yeah, we'd love to see you when we get over there. It would be so great. So we're working on that. We would love to. And
Fingers
nice
crossed.
talking to you, Jason. Thank you.
My pleasure. See you later.
Bye bye.